Hello, this is Ms. Moreland. Welcome to lesson 12.4, multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Your goals today are multiplying and dividing rational functions, just like the title says. So multiplying multiplying rationals is the same as multiplying fractions. You multiply across the top and you multiply across the bottom, and then you have to remember to simplify. So I get 4 over 6. That simplifies to 2/3. And I want you to keep that exact same process in mind when we get to ones with letters and numbers and multiple letters, okay? So to multiply rational expressions, you can either simplify first and then multiply, or I usually multiply and then simplify at the end because it gets a little bit easier for me. You can do it either way. So this first example is actually one of the harder ones because it's a little bit messier than the other ones. So what I like to do is I like to do just like I did with the fractions. I'm going to multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. So I'm first going to multiply my numbers. 12 and 15 gives me 180 on top. I have an a squared times nothing over here, so I'm left with an a squared. I have a b to the third and a b to the first, so b to the fourth. And then I have a c squared and no c's over here, so I'm just left with a c squared on top. Now I'm going to move on to the bottom. 5 times 3 is 15. A and no a's leaves me with just an a. I have a b squared over here and nothing else. And my last one is c to the first times c to the first. Remember, you add exponents when you're multiplying, so it's c squared. Right, now I'm going to take my yellow pen and I'm going to start canceling things out. So 180 divide 15, if I just type that on my calculator, that's the same thing as 12 over 1. An a to the first and an a squared cancel to make just a. So I'm left with an a on top. And if you wanted to, you could write out that a squared is a times a, and then you can easily see that that's how you're left with 1a on top. All right, and then my b squared and b to the fourth is going to cancel to become just a b squared on top, because if I have 4 on top, remember I subtract my exponents. 4 minus 2 leaves me with 2. So I'm going to put the b squared on top. And then the last one, the c squareds just cancel, so I'm left with nothing. So my final answer is 12ab squared. If you wanted to, you could write over 1. What that really means is there was just nothing left on the bottom. All right, so these ones are actually a little bit easier than the last one we did. The last one goes back and you have to remember your exponent properties. This one, you're going to have to do some factoring sometimes, but this one's nice because it's already factored for us. So again, when it's multiplying, I just draw one big line because everything on top is going to stay on top. Everything on the bottom is going to stay on the bottom. So then I start to look and see, well, I have a c plus 3 on top, and I have a c plus 3 on the bottom. Anything divided by itself is going to be 1. Or in other words, those cancel each other out, so I'm not left with any of those. Then I look and see I have a 4 on top and a 4 on the bottom. 4 divide 2. 4 is really 2 times 2. So 1, 2 cancels, so this whole thing just simplifies to 2. Okay, so multiplication is kind of like what you did for simplifying, because everything on top is going to stay on top and everything on the bottom is going to stay on the bottom. Right, and then we get to one that you actually have to do some factoring. And whenever you see something that's not a fraction being multiplied by a fraction, you're always going to make it into a fraction. How you make it into a fraction is you put a 1 for the denominator. Okay, now the first thing we're going to do is factor this thing right here, x squared minus 6x plus 9. So I'm going to draw my diamond. I want to multiply to 9, and I want to add to negative 6. So what multiplies to 9 and adds to negative 6? Well, that's going to be negative 3 and negative 3. Negative times negative is a positive. Negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 6. So this whole thing factors to x minus 3 times x minus 3. And remember, I put that 1 on the bottom, and I'm multiplying it still by 2x over x minus 3. When it's a multiplication problem, I draw a line. because it's everything on top is going to stay on top, everything on the bottom is going to stay on the bottom. If I have a pair on top and the bottom that match, I can cross them out. So I can cancel one of the x minus 3's out because those are a pair. And I can't cancel anything, so now I have to multiply across and see what I get. So I get x minus 3 times 2x, and I'm going to write the 2x in front. And that would be an answer, but we might as well FOIL it out since we, or distribute it out since we can. So my final answer would be 2x squared, and 2x times 3x is 6x. So that big messy problem up there simplified to 2x squared minus 6x. All right, I want you to pause this one and see what you get for the answer. If nothing cancels, remember you just multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. All right, so nothing cancels, as I pointed out earlier, so we're going to multiply across the top, and you can write it out like this if you want. But that's really the same thing as x plus 5 squared. And on the bottom, we're left with 8, and we can't simplify that any further, so my final answer is x plus 5 squared over 8. So with multiplication, sometimes it won't simplify, like this one, and sometimes they'll have a lot of simplifying, like our very first one that we did. Okay? All right, again, last example of multiplying positive and see what you get for this one. All right, so when I multiply this, I draw my line, and I can quickly see that x plus 4 and x plus 4 cancels out. I can't cancel the other two because they're not the exact same. So on top, I'm left with x plus 2. On bottom, I'm left with x minus 6. These are attached together. So some people want to look at the 2 and the 6 and simplify that, but you can't because the x and the 2 go together and the x minus 6 go together. Okay? All right. Oh, I lied. This is our last example of multiplication. And the reason this one is the last one is it kind of covers it all. So I want you to pause the video, and I want you to factor this one and factor that one and rewrite your problem and then see if you can cancel some things. All right, so x minus 9, x squared minus 9 is x minus 3, x plus 3. That's called the difference of two squares. I can't do anything with the bottom. Top is x minus 2. If I draw my diamond, I want to multiply to 9, add to 6. That's 3 and 3. So the bottom is x plus 3, x plus 3. And now I can cancel. I draw my line in. The only thing that cancels is an x plus 3 and an x plus 3. So on top, I'm left with x minus 3 times x minus 2 all over x times x plus 3. Now you can stop there if you want. If you wanted to distribute and FOIL, you can. So I'm going to FOIL it real quick. I get x squared on top minus 2x minus 3x plus 6, which is the same thing as x squared minus 5x plus 6. And on the bottom, when I distribute, I just get x squared and a 3x. You don't have to do that extra step. That would be the final simplified answer, but this answer right here is also just fine. Okay. All right, now we're going to move on to division, and it's the same thing as multiplying. You're actually going to turn it into a multiplication problem. So if you remember back to when you learned fractions, dividing by the fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So if I wanted to change this to a multiplication problem, I keep the first one the same, I put a multiplication sign instead of a division problem, and then I flip that second fraction, and then I can apply the same rules I just did. Multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, I get 4/3. And this one would be the same thing. I'm not going to solve this one, but it would look like this as a multiplication problem. And then you can multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. So let's get into ones with our rationals here, okay? So this one says divide the following. And you're smart. You're not going to divide. You're going to go, well, that's doing the same thing we just did, Miss Marlin. I'm just going to rewrite it. So I'm going to keep the first fraction the same, change it to a multiplication sign, and then I'm going to flip that second one. So I'm going to switch these around. So the 2x is going to go on top. X plus 2 is going to go on the bottom. And then I can draw my line in because it's a multiplication problem. Everything on top is going to stay on top. Everything on the bottom is going to stay on the bottom. And I can see that I have an x on the bottom and an x on the top. That cancels out. Now I can multiply. 8 times 2 is 16. And on the bottom, I'm just left with x plus 2. Okay? Same thing with this one. So I want you to pause the video and rewrite this problem as a multiplication problem, and then see if you can solve it. So I'm going to keep the first one the same, put my multiplication sign, write a minus 5 on top, 10a on the bottom. And the only thing that's going to cancel again are those a's that are there. So on top, I'm left with a minus 5. On the bottom, I'm left with 5 times 10, which is 50. So we haven't seen that a lot of things are canceling right now. You're going to get into some more examples that can cancel a lot more on your worksheet and stuff, but we're going to keep it simple to start. Right, so now we're getting into a little bit harder ones because we have to factor. So we should just put a 1 underneath this. And we're going to see quickly that a squared minus 25 factors to a minus 5, a plus 5. Right? So if it's a division problem, I need to rewrite it. So I'm going to keep the first one the same, change it to a multiplication sign, and that a minus 5, a plus 5 is now going to be on the bottom. And the 1 is now going to be on top. Because remember, when I don't have a denominator, I have to give it 1. And it's always going to be 1. And now you can see that helped because I have an a minus 5 on top, a minus 5 on the bottom. And all I'm left with then is 1 on top, and a squared times a plus 5 on the bottom. That's an acceptable answer. If you want to go one step further, you can distribute in the a squared and get 1 over a to the third plus 5a squared. All right, pause the video, factor this next one, and see what cancels. Don't forget to make it into a multiplication problem. All right, so this one factors to, I want to multiply to 6. I want to add to a negative 5. And that's going to be negative 2 and negative 3. So that's x minus 2, x minus 3. And it doesn't have a denominator, so I'm going to give it 1, and it's going to be 1 every single time. I need to change the division to a multiplication problem. And I need to flip it. So the x minus 6 is going to go on top. X minus 2 and x minus 3 is going to go on the bottom. And you can kind of cheat, guys, and see that, well, that's nice, because now I can cancel. So if you forget to flip your thing, you can kind of see that nothing's going to cancel. But if you do it correctly, you're going to cancel an x minus 2. You're going to cancel an x minus 3. So all you're left with is x minus 6 over 1, which if you wanted to, you could just write x minus 6. Okay. All right, so I think we're going to do this one last, and then you can get to the on your owns. So pause the video this one last time. This is the toughest one you're going to do, and I want you to see if you can try it. If not, continue watching until you get to a step where you can pause it. So this one just is hard because I have to do a lot of factoring. So that first one, you can actually factor out a 2. And the bottom, if you draw your diamond off to the side, it's going to be multiplying to a negative 3, add to a negative 2. That's negative 3 and 1. So it's going to be x minus 3, x plus 1. If I'm going to factor that top one, that's going to be the same thing as 4 times x minus 1. And that's all I can factor on that, but I want to change it to a multiplication problem. So I draw my multiplication sign, and that x plus 1 is going to go to the top because I'm flipping it. And the 4 times x minus 1 that I factored is going to go to the bottom. And again, you can see, well, that's nice. That cancels, the x minus 1s, and the x plus 1s cancel. So I'm left with 2 on top and 4 on the bottom and x minus 3, but I can go one step further. 2 over 4 is the same thing as 1/2. So my final answer would be 1 over 2 times x minus 3, and that's just fine. If you wanted to go one step further, you can FOIL that out and get 2x minus 6. All right, have a good night. Try the on your ones. I'll see you tomorrow.